All right. Hello. Welcome to another episode of From the Brink. Hosting with me is Colby Reynolds, Clay Grossman, and today Blake Fisher. And I am the founding editor of the Hitching Post, Paul Dehlinger. Originally, we were going to talk about specifically about the recent Supreme Court cases, but yesterday, pretty significant event happened. Colby, would you like to talk about the attempted assassination on former President Trump?
Yes, so President Trump was rallying in Butler, Pennsylvania, outside Pittsburgh, and in a little like makeshift rodeo arena sort of deal. And a 20-year-old man from a rooftop took 3 shots at him from about 160 yards away, and one grazed him in his right ear, and the other 2 missed, but one other round hit a local firefighter in the head as he was protecting his family, killing him instantly. And then Secret Service immediately responded, and they created I think it's called the Diamond Formation around him, and took him to his motorcade where he was whisked away and is in good condition and good spirits. This last I heard.
Playing golf today.
Yeah, he's playing golf today.
Yeah. Okay, and I guess going up to that, and like a lot of this, I mean, we are talking about it the day after the event, so a lot of the information about it is still kind of up in the air. We're not going to speculate too much on stuff because most of my information is coming from X, which is very unreliable. So we'll wait till there's more out about that. But I think it's perfectly fair to kind of comment on the environment this is happening in. So Blake, would you kind of like talk about your opinion on like what led up to something like this?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest pieces that happened such that led to this is that over the last number of years, I mean, even before the 2016 election, when Donald Trump started running and a lot of the Democrats on the left started seeing that he was pulling ahead, that they started discounting him and talking about as negatively towards him as you would have had any political opponent ever. And then when he won during his first election, there was a lot of rancor against him as well from the left side of the aisle, that through his presidency and through the 2020 election and through Biden's presidency up until this next election, there seems to have been an increase in dislike and hatred, and the conversation around Trump has been full of nothing but contempt and vile, and I think that a lot of what's been going on has just escalated over the years. And then in the last year or so, with the last 2 years, give or take, with the charges against Trump leveled, and then of course his conviction on a couple, I believe it was a couple of the felony charges, up to now them using that as fodder, such that, thank you, them now using that as, sorry about that, pardon me. But they're using that fact that he's now a convicted felon, as fodder against him. That now, of course, we can't have a president that's a felon. That's that's never happened before in the history of America, and it's the end of the world. And that's the next apocalypse, is that if he's made president again, then of course we have a felony president, and then America just crumbles in 10 seconds because we're just that fragile. And with that on the horizon, I think what ended up happening was a lot of people have been. The term radicalized has been thrown around a lot over the last, since 9/11, and I would say that a lot of people have become radicalized against the MAGA movement, which the Democrats, of course, have coined as everyone and anyone that follows Trump is, of course, a MAGA lover, and is of course, the vile of America if you follow Trump, because he himself is the felon that is that's going to bring about the end of America, basically.
Some might say a basket of deplorables.
Yeah, exactly.
One genius said that once.
Yeah, one time somewhere, someplace. But I think a lot of that over the last number of years has led up to this. In fact, I'm talking to a lot of friends, including you guys, as well as many others, that I've actually heard a lot of people say they were surprised that this hasn't happened sooner. Not that anyone's happy this happened, of course. No one's saying go team, but it with especially the last year, with Trump pulling ahead, the Biden debate coming out, the debate with Biden having come out, and everyone clearly saw that Biden was just mentally incompetent. I'm surprised it hasn't happened sooner. I'm very sorry and sad to say that it has happened, of course, in our political landscape, but I think a lot of it was led up to this. Overall, the Democrats crying out for violence against Trump and his followers and everything else surrounding that. But not so succinctly.
I think that's a good segue because, the temperature's definitely been raised, and we should note that, this has not been the only politically motivated attack. I think right after the Dobbs decision, there was a gunman that was, caught by police outside of Justice Kavanaugh's house. Now, didn't actually get the attempt to shoot at him at all, but he was going there with the attempt to murder him. So it's, temperatures have definitely been raised over the last years. I think it's safe to say we're basically at the most polarized moment since, the 60s, which, there was a ton of political bombings during that decade, as well as, and thanks. Colby, do you have something you want to add?
I was just going to say there was a previous attempt on Trump years ago while he was in his presidency. I don't know if y'all remember, there were two women that tried to pull their car out of a bush during his motorcade, if I remember correctly. And they were trying to go down this little knoll through a ditch and up to hit the motorcade. But when they got to the ditch, their car bottomed out trying to get out of the ditch. So they weren't successful, thankfully. But I think, I don't think this was the first attempt on Trump. There may be.
I think it's just maybe like the most one that got the closest.
Oh yes, definitely. He couldn't get much closer than that.
I think there were probably ones against even I know somebody threw a grenade fairly close to where George W. Bush was back in 2005, but it just didn't get a lot of coverage because it wasn't that it didn't get that close to threaten him. But we're definitely in some polarized times. What do you think about the response from it? Again, the response from X and leftists on X is going to be quite a bit different from actual politicians. From what I've seen, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and Governor Shapiro, who's governor of Pennsylvania, we're both pretty quick to condemn political violence. But I don't know, what did y'all see from y'all's perspective?
I would say everyone has said the right things up until this point. There was obviously a lot of commentary this past day or so about the delayed response from President Biden, the initial not calling it an assassination attempt. A lot of people were very critical of the media and their portrayal of. I think CNN had their initial headline reading something to the effect of "Trump fell." There was also initial speculation that he didn't get shot, but he in fact got hurt by the Secret Service taking him down, which is obviously not true. So I would say so far it has been so good, or it's been decent. It's a little bit hypocritical to hear members of the media and members of the Democratic Party go out on the record after years of calling Trump a Hitlerian figure. It seems there is a bit of hypocrisy there, but no one has said the wrong thing. And it's worth mentioning that this is sort of a red herring of an event. The last serious presidential assassination attempt was the 1981 attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, and the political ramifications of that were, Reagan obviously smoked Mondale in 1984, but had an unprecedented wave of popularity for him. So not a lot of people remember how bad Reagan was lagging in the early part of his administration. And I imagine there will be a similar, albeit smaller effect for Trump. I think he will probably gain some sort of popularity of this, and I think the lasting image of this will be him raising his fist defiantly after being shot. I'm no Trump sycophant, but even I got a little bit of chills when I saw the video and his response to it. So yeah, I would say it's not been a terrible response, but I think it falls frankly on deaf ears for a lot of media members. I don't think they're being very genuine right now. It's like you say, we're in a heightened political climate, and I don't think the response has been bad, but again, I don't believe it at this point. It's one of those things.
One response I find kind of funny is the Biden administration had 57 buses in Milwaukee attacking Trump with the convicted felon thing and whatever crap they can put on it, and they're scrambling all today to get all that crap off the buses, so they don't ruin their own image attacking Trump at this point.
Yeah,
which it makes sense.
I will say, to be a fly on the wall or a convention attendee this next week. The timing of it all is another thing. I mean, Trump's going to be giving a speech here in a few days, and I mean, I think that the atmosphere around that is going to be. I mean, there's going to be. It will be a sight to behold the next few weeks. Certainly on the Trump side of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing to touch on your bringing up the iconic shot of him holding his fist up. I with whoever got that shot of, there's two images. There's one where it's angled more directly at him, than one angled from below him. And the one from below him with his fist raised up with the American flag flying in the background, I think that's going to be one of the most iconic photos of the 2020s. I think we're going to look back and, like the Bush at the rubble at the World Trade Center, one of the most iconic of the 2000s. I think this is going to be one of the most of the 2020s.
I think so as well. I think that this hopefully has some sense of uniting the people around a president, for the sheer fact that, one, like you said, Clay, everyone's responded in the way that you're supposed to, whether they're genuine or not. That's beside the point. That's not for me to say, but everyone, liberal, Democrat, Republican, conservative, independent party, everyone is decrying this, because of course this is not what we're supposed to be at. This is not the kind of country that we are. We're not, a third world country that takes out political leaders and parties because we dislike to talk. And even though there's been a lot of heightened political violence, both physically and verbally, we don't go shooting people. And the fact that this hasn't happened since Reagan, I think, is kind of apropos, because he's, of course, keeping the Make America Great Again, which I believe came from Reagan. And sorry, my power's going in and out because the hurricane, the storm. But I was talking to someone about this earlier, is that Trump's kind of like a UFC fighter. This man got taken down right and he knew how to capitalize on that moment perfectly. He has an earpiece in that he heard. I don't know if y'all heard the Secret Service when they were on top of him. Nobody got up until they heard the confirmation like 3 times that shooters neutralized, shooters neutralized, shooters neutralized. Then they all stood up. So Trump, of course, knew the shooters neutralized, and there might have been another one. There might have been a couple more. Who knows? He didn't know. But what he did is this man goes, give me a minute, give me a minute, give me a fist up. Starts chanting fight. The entire stadium starts chanting USA. This man capitalized on that moment. And that is just a businessman, salesman personality right there, front and center. He capitalized on the moment the second it happened, knowing the world was watching, and we'll rewatch that. Colby, like I said, we'll rewatch that for decades to come. A president like we have rewatched the Reagan speech after, when the balloon pops and missed me, Huckles, and he keeps going with the speech. That's a same moment that we just witnessed right there, and now he knows. And the reason why, so I believe there were changes made to the RNC convention. Well, I guess RNC convention is kind of redundant because the C is convention, but what was that committee? Republican National.
It's convention, I think.
Convention? I think it's convention. Anyways, the RNC convention that he's going to give a speech at now. He knows the entire world is watching him. This man has the world in the palm of his hand. He's had it before in different ways, but this is a way that's a former president running for the presidential office again just got shot. Everyone's going to listen to what he's saying. Democrats and liberals are terrified of what he's going to say. Republicans and conservatives are probably more on the likely side of being excited to hear what he says, because what he's about to say at this convention, it's going to change a lot of people's mindsets around the world about what kind of country we are, because the shooting already changed a lot of people's mind around the world of what kind of country we are. This hasn't happened since 81, like Clay said. Like this, it's been decades. So this is brand new for a lot of us that have never witnessed this before. So I completely agree with that person I was talking to that said like Trump capitalized this like he was a UFC fighter. He knew exactly in the moment, this is the time to talk, this is the time to do something. And then the perfect picture, like he was Rocky fighting Apollo, just, yo, Adrian, I did it. I mean, that man just up and got it. So
I mean,
Yeah, that's
that photo,
something.
that photo is worth $100 million in political advertising. Like,
Oh yeah.
there's no if ands or but about it. So, I mean, yeah, this is going to be remembered as, like, say, one of the more seminal moments in American political history. I think the apt comparison that a lot of people have made is Teddy Roosevelt at this point. Of course, Teddy finished his speech, but
Yeah,
I think
I was talking to a friend. I was like, could you imagine the legendary stuff, the kind of legendary president he would be if this man gets back up, ears bleeding, and goes, so where was I? And it's like, oh, look at the, and it was like, that would have just been too funny. But I don't think the Secret Service would have even let him do it if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Hinckley assassination attempt, which is kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word, but that one was, kind of unique in the fact that it wasn't a politically motivated assassination attempt. John Hinckley was, I guess, a crazy person that thought he would impress Jodie Foster by assassinating Ronald Reagan. Again, we don't know much about the shooter, but I'm going to assume that that's probably not the motivation for this one. But I think
Jodie Foster still looks pretty good for her age.
Okay, well, anyways, I mean, I think it is tied into an interesting point, though. I would imagine there's probably going to be a noticeable bump from this. Just going off of X again, like I've seen a lot of very anti-Trump people who, feel as that, depending on how he responds, that they'd be willing to vote for him. This kind of ties into our last episode. While Joe Biden has not said he has said he's going to stay in the race and he has no plans to drop out. It does seem like there's mounting pressure against him to drop out and to let a younger candidate, be the nominee for the Democrats. So, what do y'all think about that? Just that comes to mind is there was the senator from Colorado, kind of brought up that he doesn't think Biden has a chance of winning in 2024, and he thinks that he should step down. So, do you think there's more of a chance now that Biden steps down, or what do y'all think?
For months, I was on the record saying it was 55 Joe Biden. This is my percentage odds. 55% Joe Biden would win. 44% Trump would win. 1% some red herring of an event would transpire. However, the last 2 weeks have been, as you said, Paul, insane. I'm just looking at it now. There are currently 23 Democrats that have called for Joe Biden to step out of the race. And however many, however much weight you want to put behind George Clooney or op-ed writers at the New York Times, whatever their opinions are worth on this matter as well. So if you'd ask me right now, I would give it if he can survive the next few weeks until the Democratic National Convention, I would say maybe 25% chance until if he doesn't drop out before then. If he survives the DNC convention, then you're just waiting on him to keel over at that point. So that would be my answer to it. He's got to survive until their convention, and then it's just a race till November at that point. And then as far as who would win, I think after the last 2 weeks, I would give Trump the edge for the first time legitimately in this election. I think that people love a martyr. People love someone that we could take a bullet for them. People don't want to vote for a dead person. I think that's really the what it comes down to. So I would give Trump maybe a 55% chance, maybe Joe Biden 35-40% chance, and then there's still 15% some random someone else is going to happen, or something else is going to happen. Someone else is going to get elected, or something else is going to happen before November. So,
well, Blake, given that you weren't on the podcast last episode, what do you think this does to Biden's chances of remaining the nominee for the Democrats?
So this is an interesting one. I don't think Biden's going to step down at all. I think if anything's going to happen, he's going to keel over, or before the election occurs, they might try to somehow invoke the 25th Amendment because they're going to finally admit, yeah, no, he's actually mentally incompetent. So 25th Amendment, Kamala Harris is now the president. Oh, she's the incumbent, Kamala Harris. That'd be a good way to sneak her in as the incumbent because there's a power to incumbency, which is again why Biden isn't stepping down. There's a power in the incumbency, and Biden is a lifelong politician. The kind of stuff that most people say you should never vote. You should never be a lifelong politician. All they do is lie, lie, lie. Well, here comes a lifelong politician against Trump, who's not been, politicians started 2016 or 2015, if you want to include the campaign. So it's like, well, when push comes to shove, you still vote for the lifelong politician. It's interesting, but in that sense, because he's a lifelong politician, this man, that as all politicians, he's been dreaming of the presidency. He ran for it 4 times before he finally got it. Started in like '92 or whatever it was, and he's never gotten it. So he's finally got in there. Every politician's dream, being the president. He's not going to give it up just because he knows he wants the 2-term presidency, like every president wants. No president wants to be a 1-term president. Who remembers a 1-term president? You don't, unless they're horrible. Well, Biden's got that at least in his back pocket in case he doesn't make it the second term. But he's not giving up. So either he kills over, or the 25th Amendment's invoked in the next couple months. Kamala's in. Kamala's the president for a month or two. Robert kicking the knee, and then she still has because she was. If you become the president at the vice president, I believe it's under 2 years, you still get 2 terms. If you're the president for longer than, I forget if it's a year and a half, 2 years, but whatever it is. If you're from the vice president and because the president's dead or the 25th Amendment's invoked or the president steps down, whatever the case is, you become the president from vice presidency longer than a year and a half, longer than 2 years, you only get 1 more term. So this would be a perfect stepping stone for her and for the Democrats who wanted to. Although I don't know if any Democrat really wants Kamala Harris as president. I know no one else outside of the Democrats want her as president because could you imagine? She shares Biden's incredibly far left leaning, liberal leaning ideology and thoughts. The difference between her and Biden is that she actually has the mental capacity to get it done. So that would be, if you think Biden's presidency has been horrible, just wait. If Kamala Harris ever becomes president, where America's down the toilet. But I don't think he's going to step down. And when it comes to him keeling over, there was this interesting thing that I forget who it was, if it was a senator or a congressman. I believe it was a senator. It was a senator. I forget which one it is. A reporter asked him, "Hey, what do you think about Biden stepping down? What do you think about him staying in the race with his obvious mental incapacities? Like, what do you think?" And this was like Wednesday or Thursday, and so the senator says, "Oh, like I support Biden running. If he thinks he can pull it out and win, then he can win. But really, we don't know. We'll just see how we get through this weekend." And everyone was like, "That's a really weird thing to say, right? Like, we'll just see how we get through this weekend." Everyone thought it, like, is he talking about like Biden? Like, what was he talking about? I think it is, and I'm not at all throwing a conspiracy out there. This is not a conspiracy. I'm not saying anything like that. I think it's weird that this senator said, I think Biden's got it. If he thinks he's got it, he can get it. But we'll just kind of wait through the weekend and see what happens. And then on Saturday, the Trump stuff. I'm not saying it's conspiracy, not at all. I just think it's just strange timing. But on the Biden train, he's not stepping down.
Colby, what do you think?
I think there's definitely a lot more pressure on him too in this past 2 weeks, especially with the rallying behind Trump now. I don't know. I don't necessarily believe right now that there's this huge wave of rallying behind him. I agree with that. America loves an underdog or a comeback story. But I believe we're pretty dang divided, so I don't see much of a huge wave of support switching from Biden to Trump. But there's definitely still a lot of pressure on Biden to step down. There's some media outlets, I saw some headlines coming out with theoretical alternate ticket polls showing that, claiming that the alternate ticket, I saw one, it was ridiculous. It was Harris and Clinton on a ticket, and they beat Trump. So I didn't look into that too much. I don't know how valid that claim is, but I still don't see him Yeah, I don't really see him stepping down unless he just keels over.
Sorry, you go.
Okay, yeah. I've noticed this too because you see a lot of anti-Trump Republicans that are like now Biden supporters, and they seem to be slightly more honest about it because they actually believe the stuff they say because they really don't like Trump. They're like, yeah, no, he should definitely step down because these numbers aren't looking good. And there's been like a lot of pearl clutching from like a lot of hardcore Democrat activists. Like, how could you say that? Like, why don't you ask Donald Trump to step down? I'm like, well, if your premise is that he's like a Hitlerian, authoritarian, then why would you bother? Because obviously he's not going to step down. Like, it seems like it's such a weird. It's like saying like, how come nobody ever asked Hitler to like not to cease fire? It's a weird question. Like, I don't know where they're getting this from, but yeah, to the point, I kind of agree with Clay. Like, I mean, it's kind of just a waiting game to the convention. It's funny because like a lot of people are surprised, like, oh, if he's this weak, why won't he step down? It's like, look, I mean, he's a narcissist. Like, I don't know where all these Democrats got this opinion that he was a, like a self-sacrificing politician. Like, he's, pretty self-serving person. So to me, it made all the sense in the world that, yeah, he's, even though things aren't looking good for him, he'd rather see if he can get that second term versus step down and let, somebody else do it. But yeah, I think there's kind of a good segue. We kind of talked about all this convicted felon stuff, and I actually think that has less of an effect on this than the actual, Hitlerian talk. I mean, I think saying that your opponent's going to end democracy is probably like, a lot worse for the temperature of the country than just saying he's a convicted felon. But he is a convicted felon, and we recently got a Supreme Court ruling on what he can be tried for. So the Supreme Court ruled that the president does have partial immunity on certain things. They sent it back to the lower court to decide what things are covered under that immunity. But Blake, as our resident legal scholar, would you kind of like to expand on that?
Yeah. Yes. So I've been giving some thought and listening to some people talk about that, and it is the common political verbiage. Biden, every other Democrat in the world. Well, when Trump gets to be presidency, now that he has full immunity, completely ignoring the partial part, now that he has full immunity, he could, bomb American citizens as long as he's the president. He can do what he wants. He can nuke Russia, and he's totally fine. He could kill his own political adversaries if he wants. And everyone's like, and every apocalyptic person in the world's like, oh my God, everyone that hates Trump, oh my gosh, Trump could just, wipe out half of America, wipe out his entire political opponents, and as president he can do it, and he's got all the immunity in the world. It's like that's not even a wrong interpretation of what went down. That is an invidious interpretation of what the Supreme Court decided, because the partial immunity means, and it's not even partial immunity in its entirety. It's only partial immunity when he's under his office, when he's conducting business as the president. So if he goes out one day, not as the president, walks down the street and decides he wants to shoot someone in the head, he doesn't even have partial immunity for that. He's another citizen that shot another citizen in the head. No partial immunity, no full immunity. That's wrong. And two, partial immunity means that he's given basically in common parlance, he's basically given the benefit of the doubt if the actions he took while under the presidency's role, he's given basically the benefit of the doubt as to why he took this action, which every president pretty much for all time has already had. This is nothing new in the president or the political atmosphere. I mean, I believe it was Obama who ended up like killing like a 16-year-old American, where it was, and pretty much claimed presidential immunity from it, and he got it. No one cared. They're like, oh,
I mean, and this might be partially my fault because I used the term partial immunity. I think the term is actually presumptive immunity for one of the categories.
Yes, it is presumptive. Pardon me, you're right, not partial, but presumptive immunity is, again, where I said he gets the benefit of the doubt, as long as the actions taken are within the realm of the presidency's office. So
yeah,
again,
well, I mean, to that point though, it's new because they haven't ruled on this.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
now.
Yeah, I'm not. What I'm saying is that there's been an understanding in American history that the president. I mean, if the president commits war crimes during a war, very rarely, in fact, I have to argue in none of the wars, there's ever been the president accidentally in charge of a war killed some civilians on the other side. Well, he's going to jail for it. It's like we've been in war. We understand there's going to be some form of casualties, as terrible as it is. The president is conducting his office to the benefit and protection of the American people and the country. No one makes the perfect step every single time. There's a presumptive immunity. There's a partial, not even partial, but like I said, presumptive immunity. There's not even full immunity. So again, as a citizen of the United States, if he goes out and does something horrible, he can still and will be charged for that. And it's mind blowing to me that every Biden supporter and Biden himself is acting like this is like, this grants the president dictatorship powers. It's now become tyrannical. And Biden even said during the debate that he's completely supports what the Supreme Court says at all times, and he respects the limit of his authority and power that the Supreme Court places on him. Where was this respect for the Supreme Court when they said that he couldn't grant, I believe it was hundreds of billions of dollars in federal student debt relief loan? Like he couldn't give every student in America $10,000 for federal relief or to pay off or to forgive student debt. Pardon me, that's what it is, to forgive student debt. He didn't have the ability to do that. And of course, what he says when he comes out is the Supreme Court is trying to stop me and block my presidential powers. Well, I'm not going to let them. I'm still going to go forward with this and try it out the other way. Well,
yeah,
when the Supreme Court disagrees with you, like you disagree with them, but when they disagree with Trump, all of a sudden you agree with them. Like it's that cognitive dissonance that a lot of the Democrat and I'll even argue that the Republican politicians seem to have and carry.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that the ruling was a lot more narrow than like politicians were claiming. I mean, some of this kind of I think is the Trump legal team's fault because they were actually going for complete immunity when they were arguing this, and I think one of the scenarios they granted or they asked was like, well, like if like a rival, a political opponent is guilty of what was the word, corruption. Could the president send somebody to assassinate them? And I think the Trump legal team said, well, yeah, I mean, actually under what we're arguing, yes, they could. And thankfully they didn't make the ruling as broad as that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there's things that, like you said, that he's not immune for at all, things that don't fall under his official acts, like, just straight up if he murdered somebody on Fifth Avenue, like the most common scenarios. And there's, like I said, presumptive where he's given the benefit of the doubt. And then stuff that he has like absolute immunity, which I mean, to me, the absolute immunity, I think was probably, further than I would have been happy with. I mean, for one, I don't like the ruling just because it's really like this isn't really in the Constitution. I mean, you kind of interpret it like a separation of powers act, which that to me would have made more sense, which was what Amy Coney Barrett was arguing for. Like Congress couldn't just make a law that makes it illegal to grant pardons because that's something that's granted under the Constitution for a president to do. But yeah, I mean, I think the system worked a lot better when it was just kind of like an unwritten rule where we don't like prosecute presidents after they leave office. As far as like making it an official legal protection, I mean, I don't. I think it gives greater incentives for people to abuse power. But Colby, Clay, what's your opinion on that?
Clay, you can go first.
Well, my opinion is that Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson are, well, I would say unqualified at that point. I mean, based off of their ruling, it was a complete judgment of it. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's no immunity clause in the Constitution. So this is something that should have been legislated where it is, but like so many other things, they get kicked to the Supreme Court at a certain point. And the Supreme Court's decision left a lot of room for interpretation here. I think what is going to happen is it's not like Trump is going to get total immunity. What's going to happen is some of these cases, like we already saw in the New York case, are going to go back to the court. They're going to review, and then they're going to eventually give him a jail sentence. So to me, I think it was a massive overreaction by the left on this one. I mean, I think even in Sotomayor's dissent, she said that no one is a king. It would make the president a king above the law, which is such a misreading of what it said. I think that they were fear mongering tremendously on this ruling, like so many other things, like in this regard. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it will be a very inconsequential decision. I think it will again just get deferred down to the lower courts again, and once they have time to interpret this ruling, Trump will be prosecuted again in some of these cases. So,
Colby?
I pretty much agree with y'all. I think it's a bit I think unfortunately the immunity ruling in terms of presidential immunity for certain actions is necessary right now, given how much power the administrative office has, even though it wasn't intended that way. So I wish we could take away some of that power so we didn't have to decide on immunity like this. But at this point, I don't think that's going to happen.
Wait, isn't that a reason not to give immunity if a presidential office has so much power? Wouldn't you want more things to be able to constrain it?
Yes, maybe I worded that wrong. Yeah.
Well, I do completely agree with that thought, Paul, too, on the sense that I like it better it was an unspoken rule. I don't like the idea of granting the presumptive immunity as law, because when it comes to any law, any decision by the Supreme Court and by courts below them, over time, it grows. He has presumptive immunity now under presidential official conduct. Give it 25 years. Give it 50 years. It will be, and again, of course, this is purely speculative, but give it 25, 50 years. Having looked at the laws of since America's been founded, while I'm currently in law school, all laws, all laws expand. They all grow. What is presumptive immunity now, in 25 to 50 years, may become full immunity for presidential official conduct. So I don't like the idea of that, the slippery slope idea that this may have opened up. I liked it better when it was unspoken. It was like, look, no one's perfect. Presidents make mistakes. Even the worst and the best all make mistakes, unless it's something grossly like walking down the 5th Street and just blowing someone's head off. Like, let's just leave it alone, move on, and we'll fix it the next presidency. However, when it comes to the felony charges, I think it's hysterical. But if we could go back to that real quick, what was he charged on?
In the New York case,
you're talking about for the New York case?
Yeah. What was he?
Yeah.
What was he convicted of?
Those were all campaign finance reforms violations, which on a state level, which I mean, is slightly different than a federal level, but.
Well, so the spearheaded this was what's her name?
Stormy Daniels using campaign funds to pay Stormy Daniels.
Yes. So it's ridiculous because Bill Clinton did pretty much exactly what Trump's charged with, but worse, because it wasn't like before the office and it was during the office, literally in the office. And yes, he did have her sign an NDA, I believe, paid for the NDA. Where are the criminal charges? Where are the criminal charges? In the state of DC or anywhere else? Where that's completely okay for Bill Clinton doing the 90s, but well, no, not in the 2000s. No, not the 2010s. No, that's not okay. Even though, again, it still happened, 15 years ago, like 2008 or whatever it was, 2005. Again, it's
wait, you're all over the place. What are you talking about? The Stormy Daniels thing, or are you talking about the Bill Clinton thing?
So the Stormy Daniels, when Trump was with Stormy Daniels, what was that, like 2005, 2008?
When it happened, yeah. I mean, the point in question, I think, was 2016 is when he allegedly paid her off. Though I think there is a more apt comparison, because I think this is what destroyed John Edwards' political career. Like, he was running in 2008 for the nomination, and it turned out he got a lot of his donors to pay a woman that he had knocked up a lot of hush money, and he actually did go to trial for that, but there was a hung jury. But yeah, I mean, they definitely didn't knock it up to like a felony charge. It was just a regular campaign violation. But I mean, like, this ruling is not the only one that only case that affects him. He's got a case in Georgia that's coming up, and a case in Florida over the classified documents, which ironically is something that Biden has also been obviously did. So there's
Well, and Biden has files in his office, some reportedly from back when he was vice president, and some back when he was senator. Like, but again, no criminal charges. He's the president, and so someone even I forget who it was discussing this. I believe it was. Oh goodness. Yeah, I'm not even trying to speculate on who it was right now. All the names are jumbled in my head, but it's completely fine for Biden to do it now because he's president now. I was like, well, the law doesn't regress that way. He does have that ability as president to have files. He's supposed to turn them over when the term is over. He's not supposed to hold on to them, whatever. But as president, he can do that. But he doesn't get to become president, and then all the stuff that he held on to from before does not all of a sudden become legal. That was still illegal. That's still not okay. Or it's still, don't do that more than it was illegal. But because he's president now, it's all, swept under the rug because, well, he's president now. He has the ability to do that. It's like, again, it's the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party allowing their own candidate and politician to do something. But of course,
well,
Trump
I mean, because that seems like the main defense is the hypocrisy thing, which that I'm more sympathetic to, because I mean, like, Trump's thing was before he was president as well, at least with the Stormy Daniels thing. But I mean, to the point between, there's federal versus state charges, even though a lot of people don't like this idea, it is actually true that, like, the Justice Department, practically speaking, cannot prosecute a sitting president, just because I would assume most of us agree in the unitary executive theory, which, I mean, a lot of, like, left-wingers make a spooky boogeyman thing because they mentioned it in Vice, but it just means, like, the president is in charge of the executive branch. So, just practically speaking, it wouldn't make sense for the Justice Department, which is part of the executive branch, to charge a sitting president. Now, after he leaves office, that's where this new immunity ruling became more relevant. But again, these are all only for, like, federal crimes, as far as whether, a state prosecution can charge a sitting or, former president is, I guess, kind of new territory that is eventually gonna get litigated. I mean, like, the classified document case, I mean, if Trump wins, it's going to go nowhere. But I mean, I guess that Georgia case is still active. Clay, Colby, do you have kind of an opinion on where that could go?
I mean, we're not out of the woods of having President Trump in a double wide out on a prison yard still. If anything, I would say it became more likely that, given the past how politically things have played out. Yeah, I mean, there's still a chance that they'll get him for the state level execution. Now, the January 6th case, I mean, I've heard some people make the argument that could almost constitute an official act, i.e., whatever the charges would be could have been construed in his official acts. Not necessarily sure I agree with that take on it, but apart from that, yeah, they could get him on the classified documents case. I mean, they have him literally dead to rights still on that case. And again, I would argue that would be out of the official scope of his office. I would say almost certainly too, and the state level prosecution in New York. I mean, he wasn't president at the time that he was allegedly committing these actions. So yeah, I mean, there is still a real possibility, and I think if the political winds are as they are currently shifting, I would say that same time next year we could realistically have Trump in a prison cell. That is still a possibility, in spite of what Sotomayor and the liberal justices might lead one of us to believe.
Yeah, I mean, and that leads to another problem, because going off that, I mean, as an originalist as I am, there is no law that says, well, if you're in jail, you can't be president. So, I mean, how does that function? Are you president from jail? Like, there's no law that says like, oh, well, if you're convicted, then yeah, it automatically goes to your vice president. I mean, practically speaking, I think it'd be weird to have a president that's in jail, but it's one of those things the Constitution didn't declare for. I mean, I think the assumption was that we would be more likely to not only impeach but convict people. But a lot of the argument I've been hearing as far as when you can charge presidents is only after they've been convicted, after impeachment. So, I mean, Trump was impeached twice, but he was never convicted of anything. So theoretically, under that rubric, yeah, he's still immune from all these things.
Well, we also wouldn't have a president sitting in jail anyways. The second he's sworn in, the first thing he's going to do is pardon himself. He can do that.
Well, what if it's a state crime? Not a federal one. Can't pardon for state crimes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, watch him do it anyways.
I mean,
you literally can't.
Well, I'm not saying that it's fine. That it's fine. First
no,
of
it's
all,
not whether it's fine or not. It's just that's not how the legal system works. Like, the federal pardon shouldn't help you or doesn't help you on state charges.
State charge. I'm aware of that. I there's something to this. I think Trump will find a way to get himself pardoned by the governor. He will. As a president, hey, pardon me.
The governor actually can't pardon in Georgia.
The Georgia governor can't pardon?
Correct. Yeah, they have to go to some kind of board. It came up a lot during the the primaries, I remember.
All right, fair enough. Well, I still think that there'll be a coordinating around the president. Like, all right, cool. Now he's a president. It kind of looks bad to have him, because also with the idea that he has a Secret Service security detail, the most likely case for a former president that's arrested, or even a president probably not arrested, but that's been charged in jail, is that it'd be house arrest, because there's no precedent for having Secret Service within a jail cell. And so a lot of legal scholars are talking about, like, if he is sentenced to jail, it's just going to have to be house arrest. Now, I think his house arrest is going to be, his jail time under his house is going to be quite nice. Nothing like actual jail time served. He's got a pretty big
house arrest in the White House. That would be interesting.
Yeah, there you go. There's another thing, that house arrest in the White House would in fact accompany the Secret Service. So that detail would probably work just fine. But what it comes down to is that, one, I don't see any state holding him in jail, trying to hold him in jail, Georgia or otherwise, that once he becomes president, whoever has the ability to pardon him. I didn't know that about Georgia. So that's interesting. But I'm sure that board would be like, look, he's our sitting president. We're not going to have him house arrested, because he still has to go out and meet foreign leaders. He still has to meet, the UN. He still has to go to the UN. He still has to go around the nation and see the people. And he has to go international. Like, we can't feasibly have him under house arrest. So whether it's a governor or some board of some committee, we'll go team, then they're all going to be like, all right, let's just pardon him for now. We'll pardon him. That's it.
I will say you have a much more optimistic view on the state of politics than I do, but that's a good attitude to have, I guess.
Fair enough. I still think that there should be some respect for the presidency, whether you agree with him or not. But I do think on the world stage, it's going to have to happen. We're going to have to pardon him if he gets sentenced to jail. Even in a state, even the most liberal state in the world is going to be like, well, pardon him because he's the president. And plus, you're going to
what if he had actually murdered somebody? I mean, all those arguments would still apply, but I assume you wouldn't be like, well, no, we still need to pardon him.
No, we should pardon him. Yeah, just let it go.
Really?
No. I mean, obviously, again, if the case, first of all, the case that he walks, he just starts blasting someone and takes them out like that. I think first degree, second degree, third degree, any form of murder, any form of manslaughter, or even negligent homicide, any of that's like, look, this guy probably shouldn't have been drunk driving. This guy probably shouldn't walk down the street and shoot someone. Like, maybe we don't pardon him for that crime. But the amount of people, and of course, again, this is more speculative, but I think pretty much everyone would agree with this. Every politician uses their funds for their electorate funds for not always just their campaign. their campaign funds. Not every politician uses them just solely purely for their campaign. So the idea that he's going to be because it's the only thing they could even possibly have charged him on. It's the only thing that they could possibly have charged him on. It's like look, every politician does it. Just pardon his ass and reform the campaign funds. Have the legislator reform the campaign funds laws and just fix it that way. But having a president under house arrest for a 4-year term, I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Upgrading it to a felony was kind of an issue. And one, I mean, I think there was also a separate Supreme Court ruling that kind of threw that sentencing into question because they had to get him on a second charge to upgrade it to a felony. In the New York Stormy Daniels case, and the court ruled that that secondary charge has to be unanimous among the jury, and this one I don't think was. They kind of left it up to the jury, like, hey, there's like these like dozen things that were potentially what he's guilty of. Just pick one, like, whatever, any of the 12, they'll all do, even if y'all don't all agree on which one it is.
Another ridiculous part about that kangaroo court was they said they gave him a list and said, we're not sure entirely what he's guilty of, but he's guilty of one of these. Pick it.
Yeah, so I mean that one was pretty problematic. I mean, this whole thing probably should have been more of a fine if they were going to charge him with something. I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, campaign.
Yeah, but then they couldn't get him. They couldn't say he was a felon. So
yeah,
of course they upcharged it.
That was kind of the motivation for this, and I mean it kind of ruined their other cases because I think the average Republican instinctively kind of went into defense mode about it when I mean I definitely think the classified documents case is very serious, even if it is kind of hypocritical given Biden's thing, and then the Georgia case seems more serious too, but I don't know if that one's ever going to get litigated. I mean, the prosecutor on that, Fani Willis, got into her own trouble. But I guess this is a good time to go into the last thing we were going to talk about. I mean, this was going to be way bigger news before the attempted assassination, but they finally overturned Chevron Deference. It was so funny. The reaction on Twitter was insane. Like there's people that were almost just as mad about the immunity case as they were about Chevron. I was like, what kind of like your average leftist doesn't even know what this is. But Blake, would you want me to explain it, or do you want to kind of talk about Chevron?
So you've definitely done more research than I am. I was going to just take the lead on this one little part from the small research I've done. I completely agree with it, in the sense that the legislators, the courts, the whole point of the courts is the interpretation of the law. So the idea that agencies would have the ability to interpret laws, one, that flies in the face of the courts themselves, the ability and the use of the courts themselves. Two, an issue with that is that you of course have the idea that agencies and society over time, and it could be within 2 years or a year, everything changes. So their own interpretation of the laws could and would change with whoever's sitting at the head of the agency, with the board, with the people running it, within the field of the agencies themselves. So the idea that they could interpret their own laws, one, is against the entire idea, not just the courts, but the laws themselves. The laws are to hold everybody accountable equally to a certain degree, to a certain standard. The idea that you can interpret the standard and degree of what you're being held to by yourself unilaterally, and the courts just have to accept it and then rule from there is ridiculous. It's absolutely preposterous. And the idea that people are upset about that the courts are and this would make no sense. The idea that people are upset that the courts have the ability and to interpret laws, to hold people accountable for those laws. Why are you upset about that? Why are you upset? First of all, the Chevron case, from what I read, for years was barely used, and it wasn't up until like the last couple of years that it started being referenced all the time, which is why it became such a big problem. Which is why, and after being kicked down from the Supreme Court twice, the Supreme Court has rejected to interpret this Chevron decision twice in the last, I forget, a couple of years, give or take. I don't fully remember. And they finally accept it now and interpreted it as to the way they did. Makes complete sense. The courts are the ones that interpret law. The legislators are the ones that make law. And the idea that you have agencies that just get to interpret it themselves is, again, like I've already said, it's preposterous. It's ridiculous. So, and that's my understanding of it. Paul, correct me if any of that was wrong, or if please expand on that more.
No, I think that's a good interpretation of the law. Just that Chevron had made it where that the interpretation of the law to be deferred to the agencies, which caused a lot of problems. To kind of move power away from the legislative branch into, I mean, technically to the executive, which is funny too. If like, there's all this concern about like an executive, like authoritarian going rogue. I don't know why you'd want the president to have more power. And it's also, I mean, it was also the Sixth Amendment kind of got involved, considering that they were allowing these like agency tribunals to decide fines, and they ruled that no, you actually do have to like try them like in like a trial with a jury before you can give fines to some of these corporations. But I want to go to Clay. I mean, you're like the resident libertarian. I assume you're pretty excited about this ruling.
Can I still be the resident libertarian at this point? I don't know if I don't know. We may need to get someone else who's like 19 that can do that or something like that. But yeah, I mean, no, I think this is a great decision. I mean, I would say absolutely, you're right, Paul. I mean, I think it's crazy that this wasn't challenged earlier. I mean, given the fact that they were charging people, these federal agencies were charging fines that were when they did not have a ruling against them. So yeah, it's a great decision. I mean, I would say, and what would inevitably happen is these agencies would leave things so vague as to allow them to be able to decide it on a whim, really. So I mean, I'm glad it's getting kicked back to the courts. Ultimately, I'm glad there will be the ability for people to challenge. It seems like it's a great thing for small businesses in particular. From everything that I've read, they can actually, the ones that actually like realistically couldn't have fought fees or whatever the federal agencies were deciding on this one. So yeah, I mean, a great decision. I think in terms of the reaction from it, it kind of reminds me a little bit of net neutrality, a little bit in a sense. Like people got their hair on fire for a minute about this, and then in a couple of years, I don't think we will actually. The difference for some people will be tremendous, but the difference for most people will not be. It will not be a big. It won't have a massive impact to the general population because. Yeah, I don't think people really understood Chevron deference up until fairly recently here. So yeah, I mean, great all around 2-week stretch. I'd say up until until the president got shot in the ear. So, anyways, Colby.
No, yeah, I agree. I admit I haven't done too much digging into this ruling, but anything that takes away unconstitutional power of the executive branch is good with me. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, what's going on in the Supreme Court? You guys want to give more power to the executive branch one day, and then the next day you want to give it back to yourself? Like left, come on, decide. Is the Supreme Court the Hilarian ones, or are we just setting up for Project 2025 and Trump to just declare himself dictator? I don't know. What is the left trying to say today? Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would have just a lot more respect for some of these leftists if they could just be like more honest about stuff. Like, I do hate when they go back and forth where like, oh no, like this is the president should totally have the power to just kind of arbitrarily interpret laws to something they like, but then at the other end they're like, oh my god, this immunity like makes like the president a king above laws. So it's like, okay, like it's it's just gotten out of hand. Like it's another excuse to freak out. Which again, this like surprised me so much because the amount of anger people had over Chevron, which is like was only like a ruling that like niche like people like political nerds like us kind of actually cared about. Like, and they just I don't know, they got told from on high that they should be mad about it, and people were freaking out. So they almost had no room to be even more mad about the immunity thing. They were already at 11. So.
One question: Do you agree with Project 25? Are you a part of Project 25?
I've read the entire
925.
Yeah, listen.
Yeah,
I've read
2025, whatever.
Let me just say, I've read the entire 900-page document. I read it actually every night before I go to sleep.
It's your nighttime, pastime reading.
Yes. I'm a big fan of it. If they can actually put forth unitary executive theory and nothing else from that document, I will actually be a fan of Project 2025.
It's so funny because that's such an uncontroversial opinion that people freak out about. Like I was talking about the Dick Cheney movie Vice. They made it seem like this was like a niche idea Scalia came up with that like says like, well, if the president decided this, it's the law. I'm like, no, it just means like the president's in charge of the executive branch. And another uncontroversial thing. Like, but I mean, you're going back to this 2025 thing. I mean, I'm sure some of it's probably a little more, out there for me, but I mean, a lot of it, they're just like I'm pretty sure it doesn't want to bring like a Handmaid's Tale kind of world. I know that's what everybody on Twitter is arguing about. That was like the new thing, like it's doing posts of clips from the Handmaid's Tale, and it's just like, well, we got here because Biden was too old, like I'm pretty sure. I mean, one, like MAGA's not even that socially conservative. If we've seen anything, it's like they're pretty like aggressively trying to like distance themselves from any like hardcore abortion rule, and they're like, no, what? Like, was it both JD Vance and Marco Rubio were saying that like, oh, they're fine with the abortion pill. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's not a particularly like socially conservative position. Well, I don't know. I think that's probably a good stopping point for today. This has been From the Brink. We'll be back to you here in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Adios.
Bye.
See you.